Welcome to this special edition of the Quick Start Podcast. I'm Billy Hollowell, and we are joined today by Pastor Jason Noble. He is the real-life pastor depicted in the film Breakthrough. Now, if you didn't see that movie, you might remember the story at the center of it, the true story of John Smith, a 14-year-old boy who fell through the ice in Missouri and was underwater for 15 minutes. His heart was apparently stopped for nearly an hour before he was revived. Many believe it was his mother's miraculous plea and prayer to the Lord that brought him back to life. So much to unpack here. Jason is joining us to talk all about the miracles he saw during that time and in the years since. It's an incredible update to an amazing story. And I want you guys to also check out our documentary, Investigating the Supernatural Miracles. We deal with all sorts of real-life miracle stories just like this one, medical miracles that you will not believe, but that we vet and we take you through in a really powerful journey. You can go to cbn.com/supernatural to check that out. But with no further ado, here is Jason Noble. Well, Jason, it's always good to connect with you. And I have wanted for a long time, we've been friends and I've known your story and John Smith's story for a very long time, as millions of other people around the country and the world do. But, some time has passed and I love getting a chance to dive back in to this story and sort of learn what has happened since. Now, your story was told, obviously, and John's story in the film Breakthrough. And this happened in 2015 where John fell through the ice. It's a crazy story. For those who don't know, give us some of the back details.
Yeah, I mean, it is really one of the most, I really say it's a modern day Lazarus story. When you look back and you see, so John, he was 15 years old, fell through the ice in St. Louis, was dead, was under for 15 minutes, dead for an hour and 15. And his mom walked in and she prayed, Holy Spirit, bring my son back to life. And a lot more animated and a lot more intense than that. And it was at that moment, every machine came back to life and John was back to life. And that was just the beginning, right? He coded 3 or 4 more times. I mean, just the incredible story of how God showed up in that situation. We got there, and the doctor said there was a 90% chance, a 99% chance that he would not live overnight. So 1% chance that he would live. If he lived, he would be a vegetable for the rest of his life. And basically, we prayed, and there's so much more to the story than even what was told in the film. We prayed. We took a group of pastors in the room. We started praying over John because we were not going to let John go. Like, that was something that we decided, is that John was going to walk out of that hospital room. And when we walked into the room, the pastors and I, we started praying 2 things over John. His lungs were so contaminated with water, and probably in some of the dirtiest lake water in the city that you could fall into. And they said, we've never seen somebody that would have this much like water in their lungs. So we prayed, God, give him a new set of lungs. And as we were praying that, I turned around in the room and there was an angel that was floor to ceiling. And I'm like, oh my word. And it took me back to a hospital room in Port Angeles, Washington, about 4 years before that, where I was praying over an 85-year-old lady. I got a call from her daughter, and her daughter said, listen, my mom is dying. She's on the edge of eternity. We think she probably only has maybe 30 minutes left. And I walked into a room and I got down by her ear and I said, ma'am, like, you're on the edge of eternity. If you want to give your life to Jesus, squeeze my hand. And I'm like, I hope this works, right? And so she squeezed my hand, and all of a sudden I turned around and I saw that same angel in her room. And I'm like, okay, God, there's
So
something.
this was the same angel.
Same angel. And what I've come to find out, and what I've really come to I think that angel was sent to protect them and walk them, because like 15 minutes later, this lady started getting all the color back in her body. An hour after that, she woke up and she said, I've given my life to Jesus, which I'm like, which is the ultimate miracle, right? When you look at it. And then the next day she went home completely healed. And so I turned back to John in that hospital room, and all of a sudden I saw his eyes open. He overbreathed the respirator. And I'm like, okay, God, like, you're doing something. Like, I know you are. And then we started praying over his mind, like God recreate his mind, and over his head. It was like God put a million colors, like just knitted his brain back to it. It was like electricity in the room. And again, I turned around and I saw his eyes open and like his back come off the mat. And, the nurses are always like, oh, that's just typical for brain dead people. Like, that's just how it happens, whatever. And I'm like, no, God's doing something in this room. And so I walked out to Joyce, and Joyce and I at that moment, which is funny because in the movie it showed that we had this terrible relationship and that I kicked the women out of the church and all that stuff. That was not the case. Joyce and I had never had an argument in our life, and walked out of that room, and I said, Joyce, I don't know how or when, but John is going to walk out of here completely healed. And so I went home, took a shower that night, was with him the next morning, walked into his room, and the doctor said, no, he's still brain dead. I'm like, I just don't buy it. I do not buy that he's brain dead. And walked up to his bed and I said, John, this is Pastor Jason. And we had never officially met. I was a new pastor there. Like, this was the first time we were really meeting. And all of a sudden I go, do you want me to stay with you? And tears rolled down his eyes. And I go, oh, this kid's alive. So on Wednesday, that happened Monday. Wednesday, he woke up. By Thursday, we had doctors coming in and the nurses coming in, and he had this raging fever. And they said, we think there's infection in his lungs. And so literally we sent that prayer request around the world, like, God, we need his lungs to be healed. And I knew what God had done in that room the first night. And I'm like, I think God gave him new lungs, right? And so about 5 hours later, the doctor walked in and held up this report. And he said, I don't know how this happened, but like, no one has sterile lungs in the Midwest. All the stuff that you breathe in, like, I mean, just like, you're going to find something. But we have this report, and John has sterile lungs. It's like it's brand new, right? And so then Friday, we were met by all of the doctors and everybody, the nurses. They had a list of prayer requests that we literally sent around the world. By the end of that day, every prayer request had been met. And so every day we walked in from that point forward, they gave us that list. We sent it around. But what had happened is John was completely healed, walked out of the hospital 14 days later, and was no sign, cleared by all doctors 40 days after that. And he is now a 25-year-old young man. His birthday is actually today as we're recording
Oh,
this.
wow.
Yep, he has 2 children. And all of the stuff that we found out afterwards has just been amazing. When you see how God just puts a story like this together, and you just see how everything just falls right into line. It's one of the most incredible miracles I've ever seen, and continues to be. Like, as I
I
travel the
mean,
world, I still hear people saying, man, breakthrough, like, touched my heart like I've never experienced before.
it's incredible to me. I mean, you just described about 45 miracles in a row surrounding this story. Obviously, just to emphasize, underwater for 15 minutes, no pulse for over 40. The first miracle being his mother praying over him. He comes back. Then you have the infection risk. You have, obviously, he's brain dead. They're telling you there's a 99% chance he's not going to live. Not only did he defy all of those things, but there were other elements. The fact that you saw this angel in the room. Outside of those 2 times, as a pastor, had you experienced seeing angels in that way, or were those the only 2 times?
I see it. Like, there's times where, like, in our church, I'll say the church is surrounded by angels. Or there was other times. I mean, like, I've seen them before.
That's amazing. And, to see it and then have the events happen right after is so faith affirming too, right? Because there are people who will say, oh, I don't know if that's true. Or, oh, even in the church, they'll debate these things. And it's like, a lot of people have these experiences. How else do you describe, when you look at the details of breakthrough? I mean, it is absolutely incredible. You mentioned he's got 2 kids. He's married now. He's, really just lived this incredible life over the last almost 10 years, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
When you look at this story, what is the big takeaway that you want people to have when they think about breakthrough and everything you just described?
There's a couple things. One thing I've learned is that we have to position ourselves to work with God to see these miracles happen. We're the conduit. And I did a study. I wrote a book called Breakthrough to Your Miracle, kind of our teaching, like everything we learned walking through this. And I looked at all the New Testament miracles. And one of the things that I saw, and I knew it, but it really became alive to me, was every miracle that God did had a human component, whether that be Jesus or it be another person who God used to partner to see a miracle happen. And so within that, I think we play a really important part of seeing miracles happen. If you are walking in with doubt and unbelief and fear and all of those things, I think it can literally stop the miracle working power of God in our lives. I mean, we see that when Jesus walked into his own city, right? In scripture, where the Bible says he was only able to do a few miracles. And I think the outcome doesn't depend on us, but I think the ability for God to work really plays a lot into our hands because he chooses to partner with us. And so it was interesting. About 9 months after John's story, a kid walked in. Like we got a call that a boy had been in a Jeep accident and was in intensive care, and they could not move him. They needed to move him from one hospital to the other, and walked in and found out the mom was just like falling apart. She was in doubt. She was in disbelief. His numbers were down. I said, we need to get her out of here. Like there can't be any doubt or disbelief in this room. And literally, as she stepped out, within 15 minutes, his numbers were up, and they were able to move him from another to another hospital. So there's something that happens in the supernatural realm. That's something that you learn. The other thing about these miracles is what we call a tapestry of miracles. We all want a big miracle, but many times God works in one miracle at a time. And we were in the middle
Wow.
of the story with John, and we're like, man, it just seems like, God, this is taking forever, right? I mean, it was 7 days in, it wasn't taking forever, but the enemy kind of got us sinking in that direction. And God goes, look at all the miracles I've already done. And it really hit me that we have to be thankful every time God does a miracle, because it adds up to this beautiful tapestry and we see God show up. The other thing is when we walk into these situations also, um, God has an incredible plan. And if you'll just walk it out, you'll see how things just fall in line together. And hey, listen, the answer is not always that a person lives. And I think we have to be okay
Yeah.
with that too. The miracle, the greatest miracle is salvation. And I tell Joyce and I tell people all this all the time. We pray for more people that have died than lived. And really, if God, I think if God was being graceful to us, he would take us home rather than keeping us
Yeah.
here. And I tell people
Yeah.
all the time, nobody, the news flash is nobody gets out of here alive. John's not going to get out of here alive. Lazarus didn't get out of here. I mean, we're all going to die. And so the greatest miracle is salvation. And I think that
I
that's
love
something
that.
that we learn.
Okay, so this is so important. You said so many things there.
I
It's
know,
really
sorry.
about having faith and dying to yourself. No, I mean, you said so many things that I want to like dig into because they're so good. When you go back to that prayer that Joyce said over her son in that hospital, right? And you think about unbelief. If Joyce had no belief, if Joyce didn't say that prayer, if Joyce didn't step out in faith in that way, in that desperate moment and cry out to God, is it possible that John would not have lived, that he would not have come back, that those machines would not have turned back on?
100%. 100%. And I had met Joyce the first time I met her. She was in my office, and she would tell you this story. So I have permission to tell you the story because she's told it everywhere we go. She was really partnering with control and really trying to control all the situations in her life, control everything that was going on. And she came in and broke, and this was like September. And I just called her. I said, listen, you can't control this stuff. You've got to stop partnering with control and let God just do what he's going to do, because it's driving you insane. And I think even that conversation, if she would have walked in there and tried to control and tell God what to do, I mean, like at the end of the day, like it's amazing how God set her up to be ready to walk into the hospital. And I tell people all the time, it's a life or death situation. She had 1 second to decide whether she was going to fall apart in fear or rise up in faith. And if she would have fallen apart in fear as she walked into that hospital room, literally, I think John would have not been here today. And an interesting
Yeah.
fact that John will tell you is that he was not serving the Lord when he went under the water. And so she was literally like fighting for her son's salvation. I mean, he would tell
Wow.
you that. It took him about 2 years after the fact to fully surrender his life to Jesus. And some
Wow.
people ask us, the question we always get right is, well, did you see heaven? Did John always says, people ask if I saw the golden arches. No, that's McDonald's. Anyways, but he said no, and we had prayed that. One of the things the Lord really put on our hearts is pray that he doesn't see or remember anything while he was underwater, because it was so traumatic. And he said he just saw darkness because that's where his heart was. And so,
Wow.
really interesting. I will throw one thing in. When I studied fear, or when I studied faith, right? Because people will say, well, if I just had more faith, then maybe God would show up and do it for me or whatever. I think there's a difference between faith and belief, right?
Mm.
So they kind of come from the same bucket, but a lot of people spend time trying to build their faith. What did Jesus say to the disciples when the disciples said, well, could you give us more faith? No, Jesus said, no, all you need is the size of a mustard seed, but it's that belief. And it's interesting. Most of the New Testament miracles, they say, Jesus would say, you're healed because of your belief, not because of your faith, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's interesting. And so what I always say is faith is like knowing where every gym is in town, and belief is like actually going to work out. Belief
I
is what
like that.
you're building. right? Like you're holding on to God's promises. You're building your belief so that you can walk into a situation and believe that God is going to be who he said he was going to be.
Wow, that is a powerful word, and trusting, right, is very different. It's putting that trust in, and you're going to be okay with whatever happens. You're going to hold those tensions together. That I'm going to trust that God can do it, but I'm also going to trust that God might not, and I have to be okay with that because His will is what matters. His plan is what matters, and that healing might not be part of that plan, but you're going to get healing on the other side. You're going to get the healing. It's just a question of whether it's here or it's in eternity. Oh my gosh, I mean, there's so much to this. As we kind of come to a close, how did this journey, specifically John's healing, change you as a pastor, as a believer?
Yeah, I mean, it just like has literally changed a lot of the aspects of my life. I mean, as far as like I've always believed God for this stuff, but to see the doors God has opened, to see the miracles. We had 150 healing miracles after the story of breakthrough at our church. And just to be able
Wow.
to see God's hand at everything. One cool thing, John was adopted from Guatemala, and had always, one of the big challenges that he had in his life is he always wondered like why his mom gave him up. He always wondered, that whole adoption piece. Well, we found that through a series of events, he actually found all of his real mom's contacts. And 2 Octobers ago, we flew down and we met his birth mom in Guatemala for the very
Wow.
first time. And so to see even that play, just to see God's goodness in all of it and in God's plan. And you know what? If John would have died, I would still be saying the goodness of God, what God has done. I mean, like, um, and so just to see that play out and to say, God, thank you for allowing me to be a part. I have a front row seat on an incredible miracle, like one that has
I love
been
that.
shared around the world. And listen, the doctors have not been able to replicate. They've tried literally since John went under the water to replicate it. I was working on a project where a guy was doing a medical app. And I told him, I said, hey, like, this is our story. And he goes, no way. He goes, I have doctors that are trying to put the protocol into this app based on breakthrough so that they can help save other people, and they can't replicate it. And so it's
Wow.
amazing,
They need
amazing.
they need a bunch of Joyces to show up on their app and pray. That's what they need.
100%, man. And you don't mess with Mama Joyce. I'm telling you, but I will say this too, like you have to fight. You have to fight for this stuff. Like you have to be willing to
Yeah.
jump in and fight for what God's word says and not give up, no matter what it
Yeah,
looks like.
till your last breath, even if it takes till your last breath. I mean, that, in working on investigating the supernatural miracles, we've talked about the film that I worked on. That was my biggest takeaway, was that all of these people who got their miracle, and not everybody did, but all of them who did get it, they fought, some of them for 10 years endlessly, to the point of not even wanting to fight anymore, but continuing to. I
Yeah.
think we have this sense that God's just going to do it right away, and He might, but guess what? More often than not, it seems like that's not how it works. You have to fight for it. And
You have to
so,
fight for it. Yeah, you have to
yeah.
contend. And like you'll see one aspect, like when John came back to life, like that was one part of the miracle. But then again, we could have totally fallen apart in the fact that, he coded another 4 times, that nine, and it's like, no, you can't fall apart when you get the bad news. It's a matter of sticking in there and saying, God, we are not going to give up and quit until we see it all the way through, and
Okay, so, well, I have to. Well, go ahead, finish that thought, and then I
let
want to
me
ask
just
you
throw
one
this
more.
out to you. Like people are always going to get their healing. They're always going to get the miracle. It may be on the other side when they walk into heaven. People will say that, well, I guess God just didn't heal my loved one. Oh, yes, He did. He totally healed that loved one. May not have been here, but was when they walked on into heaven. And I think they hear the good, well done, good and faithful servant.
I love that. I love that. Okay, my final question for you: if people want to grab your book and read it, where can they go to do that?
You can do it on Amazon. Amazon, you can find the story of Breakthrough, which I would read that. Joyce wrote a book, and then Breakthrough Your Miracle is on Amazon also.
Awesome. Well, as always, it was great catching up with you. Appreciate your time and taking us through this. This is an important topic, and we really do appreciate it.
100%. Thank you. Appreciate it, buddy.
That's all for today's Quick Start podcast. Make sure you tune in Monday for another episode of the show, and be sure right now to head on over to cbn.com/supernatural, and that is where you can watch Investigating the Supernatural Miracles. We deal with real life, incredible healing miracle stories that you need to see to understand just how incredible it is that God is working in our world still today. It's cbn.com/supernatural. We'll see you Monday.